Well, thank you all for coming. My name is Matthew Hora. I'm an assistant professor of adult and higher education and continuing studies and the director of the Center for Research on College to Workforce Transitions. Thank you all for coming to hear me talk in a relatively ad-lib fashion about a recent trip I took to China to study college internships. And for the qualitative researchers in the room, the ethnographers, you know that you have a lot of fresh impressions right when you get back from the trip. And so that's what this talk is about, because I'm still collecting data, our survey's still in the field, still analyzing some of the preliminary findings. So this is intended as a conversation, just to get some ideas out there, and I really want to hear what a lot of you have to think, especially since I think many of you in the audience have experienced the Chinese educational system firsthand. And so if you have any observations, questions, critiques, please don't be shy. I've also posted the slides on slideshare.net, so don't feel compelled to take photos or write things down. If you go on that website, you just punch in Hora and China internships or something like that. The PDFs of this slideshow will pop up. So first I want to give a really quick introduction to our center. Some of you are very familiar with it, but in a nutshell, our mission is to conduct and support applied research on students' experiences with the transition from college to work, with the emphasis on experience. Because there's lots of research and policy making out there that ignore the student and what they have to say and what their experiences are. And so in our center, we're really focused on giving voice to what students are thinking, feeling, and doing as they think about their careers and go out into the labor market. As part of the center, we're doing things like these symposia, and we have seminars every month. We have a labor market research program, which Dr. Mattias Scaglione here is leading up, examining skilled non-college occupations, or what many people call middle-skilled jobs. We also have a participatory action research project headed up by Dr. Wolfram in the back and Dr. Smolarek up here. And this semester, they're engaging a group of Hmong American undergraduates and how they're experiencing college and how it's influencing how they think about careers. So we have a lot of things going on at our center. One of the things that's really occupying our time right now, though, is the college internship study. And this was inspired, and I put that in quotes because I could also say alarmed or appalled, by the proposal in Wisconsin's biennial budget 2 years ago to make internships mandatory to get a bachelor's degree in the state of Wisconsin. And the reason I say alarmed and appalled is when we did a literature review of internships, we found that there's relatively few rigorous empirical studies about internships and how they contribute to student outcomes. Part of the problem, and this is a good problem in some ways, is that literature is scattered across disciplines from criminal justice to media arts to art history and mechanical engineering. But it's also scattered across nations. So you have researchers in different disciplines and countries using different definitions of internships in different research methodologies. So you cannot really compare findings from across situations. Basically, it's resulting in terminological confusion. Nobody really knows what internships mean in the literature. And so, as we did this literature review, we also identified some features of internships that seem to be strongly associated with positive student outcomes. A lot of these have to do with the structure or the format of the internship program. Supervisor support, how well is the job site supervisor actively mentoring the student? Task clarity, how clear are the tasks that the student's being asked to do? And do they have autonomy to do it? And then coordination with academics. This is one of those unspoken assumptions about internships, that they're strongly linked to the academic program. But that's not the case in many situations. And so these are just a few of the factors that the literature shows are related to students' positive outcomes. And so this led to some of the research questions in our study. The first, we're asking, what are students, educators, and employers' emic or insider or local conceptions of internships? As an anthropologist, I'm really interested in how people themselves define something, define an experience. And so this is one of our major questions. How are people in the field actively thinking about these programs? Then does participation vary by race, major, or socioeconomic status? Another growing issue in the internship literature and in the field of practice is who has access to these programs, and is it equitable? We're also interested in to what degree some of these structural characteristics are associated with positive student outcomes. And then, because it takes a lot of staff and resources to actively pull off a really good internship program, we're asking, are there institutional resources and procedures in place at the college or the departmental level to really have an equitable and high quality internship program? So these are the research questions that are guiding this college internship study. And I just wanted to mention briefly that the main focus, again, is we don't have a normative idea about what a good internship should be. We primarily want to document how they're actually being implemented in the wild, in the field of practice. And in particular, we wanted to problematize internships, just the idea and the enactment of internships as a problem of social mobility and inequality. Is it contributing to one or the other? And a problem of instructional design, where internships are a venue or a place for learning and student development. Not just a program you go through, but they require as careful a design as a classroom activity. And so this is some of the ways that we're thinking about internships in this study. In 2018, we launched the study at one tech college, 2 comprehensive, predominantly white institutions, and 2 comprehensive HBCUs. And next year, we'll be expanding the study even further. And you can see, based on the topic of this talk and the map, also expanded the study to China. Part of the reason of this cross-cultural comparative research program is to really identify strengths and weaknesses in different national systems of hosting and implementing these programs, primarily with the goal to learn from one another. Often in higher education research, when people are studying China and the US, it's through the lens of competitors. Like, this is a global competitor with our economy, and we need to figure out how to beat them. This cross-cultural study is being engaged with the spirit of cooperation and really trying to figure out how can we learn from one another to make all of our students' experiences more positive. So I spent 2.5 weeks at Tianjin University. It's one of the largest research universities in China. They were founded in 1895, the oldest public university, I'm led to understand, in China. It has 18,000 undergraduates, a ton of graduate students, mostly master's students. And the picture in the upper right is at the new campus. What's happening with a lot of Chinese universities is they're growing so quickly, they're outgrowing their urban, the original campus. It would be like UW-Madison needing to build a 20-acre campus out in Sun Prairie. And so this campus there's cranes everywhere, and it's rapidly becoming the center of the university. So you can see there, and I was fortunate to be awarded a foreign expert grant. I was hosted by the School of Education there, and also I had a great time being a tourist. One of the things that I love about Chinese cities is the light shows in downtown, so I just kind of rocked out on the lights. But one of the cool things about Tianjin, in the bottom left, that's kind of a replica of a track that Eric Liddell built. I don't know if you've all seen Chariots of Fire, but he was the British runner, who went to the Olympics, and he was born in Tianjin. And this is right downtown where there's a lot of foreign concessions, where the German, the French, and the British built a lot of buildings in the late 1800s. And so it's a fascinating city to be a tourist in. Before I talk about some of the data, I just want to sketch out some of the context of internships in China. I'm not a sinologist. I'm still learning a lot of this stuff. So again, if anybody has any insights or things you want to add or critique, please let me know. But from my understanding of the context of internships, you have to think about the historical traditions of education in China, which if you go back thousands of years, this model of generating students for the elite bureaucracy, where they're being taught primarily through memorization and recitation of the classics. Confucian analects being memorized and repeated in order to get a top-level bureaucratic position. This is also hand in hand with these class distinctions, where working with your hands or the trades is seen as lower class. And so the goal for a lot of parents then and now in China is for their students to go on this trajectory to get them to the elite bureaucratic class. Some of the other contexts, the first one, there's not as strong a tradition of apprenticeships, as far as I can tell, in China as there are in some other countries, but they definitely are part of the system. Especially in Chinese medicine, young people would apprentice with an acupuncturist or an herbal medicine physician for many years before they're allowed to become part of the profession. So apprenticeships are definitely part of the tradition of education in China. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this connection was made by one of my hosts, when I asked him about what's the history of internships in China, the first thing he mentioned was, you can't understand internships now without looking at the Cultural Revolution and the down to the countryside movement. Now, when people talk about down to the countryside, they're often thinking about the ideological rationale, where a lot of young high school and college students were taken from the cities and sent out into the agricultural regions of China, primarily to instill a revolutionary proletarian spirit. And that was part of the rationale for this movement, but there also was a political rationale. There was a lot of Red Guards, these young, educated, very politically engaged, sometimes violent students, needed to be dispersed from the cities, and so they were sent out to the countryside. And also the lack of jobs in the cities contributed to this movement. And I found this fantastic archival footage of what some of this meant for young people in China in the 1960s.
The area in front of the Changchun station is filled with young people, ranging from college to junior high school students. Many special trains depart, carrying students to the countryside. For junior high school students, it is like a picnic. It is impossible for them to undertake full-scale agricultural work at their age. Rather, they are expected to learn from the peasants and from their experience in the countryside. These Changchun tractor factory workers depart in a large group, with tractors taking the lead. While the students will stay in the villages for some time, many of the workers who have their own jobs to attend to will return on the same day. Cities are like grains of millet floating in the vast sea of China's peasant villages. People in the cities go to the villages to aid agriculture, to know peasant life, and not to forget the villages. It is considered useful for leaders and cadres especially to learn the class feeling of laborers and peasants in order to overcome bureaucracy and prevent revisionism.
So when this professor of vocational education mentioned this to me in the context of modern Chinese internships, he was not suggesting that college students are going to be shipped out to the countryside like happened in the 60s. It's more that there's a very strong feeling that what students are learning in college, especially university students, is overly theoretical, academic, and dry, and there's a strong lack of hands-on vocational training and grounding in the trades that continues to this day. Some of the other contexts for contemporary Chinese internships. On the left, the GDP of China, as I'm sure most of you know, has been phenomenal in the last 10, 15 years. And so you have a huge number of companies growing, having positions opened, and so there's a huge demand for talent. And so you can see it compared to the US GDP growth. So there's that. And internships have been seen as one of the ways to get talent from the educational system into these companies. You can also see the huge expenditures from the government on higher education. There's been a massive growth in the number of universities and college students in China. And so you also have a large number of students going out into the labor market looking for ways to be competitive. And internships are often seen as one of those ways you can differentiate yourself from your peers. There's also a very strong undercurrent, though, critiquing this idea of the Chinese version of college for all. And this goes back to what I was just sharing, the vocational education professor told me. Part of this has to do with this feeling that there's not enough jobs in China that require a bachelor's degree trained student. And so this was an essay published in Nature where this man just wrote, we need more workers and academics, and China must no longer look down its nose at vocational education. So just like in the US, where you hear people talk about we need more welders, not philosophers, which Marco Rubio famously said in the last presidential campaign, you have a very similar sentiment that's growing in China. Now, interestingly, one of the other trends going on that influences the world of internships is China, is the last 10-year educational plan from the central government basically was articulating a vision for active and inquiry-based learning in Chinese classrooms. You can see on the bottom, this is traditionally, and those of you who have gone to a Chinese university, tell me if this is accurate or not. A lot of classes are taught with passive students sitting through a lecture. And the government is hoping to change this into a more exploratory, discussion-based, and participatory mode of learning within the classroom. And so internships are seen as part of this. And as you'll see from my data, I think in some cases internships are seen as the only way that this is going to be enacted in the higher education system in China. Now, I can't talk about internships in China without also mentioning the dark side. Some of you may have heard about labor abuses in Chinese factories. Some of these are happening where students in vocational high schools or colleges are being forced to work by their teachers and administrators in factories for long hours and insufficient pay with no connection to their academic program. In part, that's because there's an arrangement between some vocational colleges and the government and industry for these schools to provide workers in times of ramped up production, such as the recent iPhone 10 release. And some of these are very recent. This one on the right having to do with Foxconn, which, as you all probably know, is having a very strong presence here in Wisconsin. And at the bottom you can see part of the analysis of what's happening is a lot of these factories are trying to cut costs and do things really quickly. And they're looking at student laborers, student interns, as a core part of that strategy. These are students that can be hired and fired very quickly. Once you hire somebody in China to their second labor contract, it's almost impossible to fire them. Student interns are part of the current labor strategy in Chinese factories. And so Jenny Chan, we're hoping to bring her as a speaker next semester from Hong Kong to speak about some of these issues. But this has to be part of the conversations about internships in China. So now the data. So the design of the study, it's a concurrent mixed method study, meaning that we're collecting qualitative and quantitative data at the same time and letting the analysis of each one influence the other and inform the other. The sample for the survey is all seniors except for nursing and allied health and teacher ed. And at the end of our survey, students are self-selecting into focus groups. And the data I collected in China, it was with 85 students, interviews with 14 faculty and 8 employers. I also visited a few companies and different colleges. And the data collection, I used a semi-structured protocol and did a free list exercise I'll talk about in a minute, all with the assistance of the young lady on the far left in that bottom left picture who is my translator. And those are some other students in the College of Education who helped me in my field work. And there was a photo taken of every single focus group. And so this is one I did with a group of first-year students dressed in their military fatigues, which is compulsory when you're starting at this university. they came in all sweaty from doing their exercises out in the field. And so the first set of data I wanted to share is from our free list exercise. And this is where I gave students a piece of paper and asked them to write down what are the first words that pop into your mind when you think of internships. The salient score on the far right is a weighted average that reflects if the student mentioned that term frequently across the sample, but also near the top of their list, which indicates some psychological salience. And so you can see experience, getting experience in your profession, in your discipline is the top one, followed by work, internships about work, and then factory, this is where an internship happens. But one of the limitations with this method is the use or reliance or focus on a single word often masks a lot of nuance. And so what I did is I asked students to explain, why did you write down that first word? And so you can see here, one mechanical engineering student says, I wrote down factory because what we've learned in the university is theory. If we want to practice those theories, we go to the factory. And so in his free list, factory wasn't just about the place, it was also about a mode of learning and had to do with the limitation of his university education. And I wanted to show you some of the data we're collecting in the US, just as a point of comparison. This is from a technical college in the US, and students with and without internships are on the left side. Educators and employers are on the right two columns. And you can see a lot of similarities and differences with the Chinese sample, but I just wanted to point out a few. One is the reference to pay, which the Chinese students did not mention once. The focus on pay was interesting in our US sample because the students with an internship talk about being paid, and the ones without an internship talk about being unpaid. And we're thinking that part of this is the supposition that some students who haven't taken an internship, that they're all unpaid, which is the case. Many of them are unpaid. But this is an interesting point of contrast with the Chinese sample. Within this sample, it's interesting for us that mentorship is being mentioned by educators and employers, but not the students. Where educators and employers are looking at the intern as somebody that they can or should mentor. Similarly, learning was mentioned by everybody except for the educators, which is just an interesting thing. And I just wanted to go back to the Chinese sample, where again, pay, mentoring, advancement, and career are not part of their thinking about internship programs. And for a lot of the students in the US, when we talk to them about internships, the focus on advancement or advancing in their career and exploring career options is a really strong focus. And you'll see in a minute why I'm hypothesizing it's not as strong a focus in this Chinese university. So the structure of internships, just like in other countries, it varies considerably from department to department. We can't make generalizations about internships within a university, much less a college. That's like, I think, one of the first key findings of our study. So I just want to talk briefly about architecture, engineering, and English. Within architecture, what happens is the students undergo a first internship. Faculty call this a cognitive internship. It's usually 2 to 3 weeks, and it happens after the end of their second year. In architecture, this meant going to the library for 2 weeks and hearing from the librarian how to do research, how to access, the collections in the library. In engineering, this meant going to a lab on site, on the campus for 2 weeks to learn how to operate machinery. The second internship happens when they're seniors. And for the architecture students, this was 2 or 3 months out at some design firm that the student has to find themselves. The faculty don't really facilitate any relationships. It's all on the students. For the engineers, however, it's 2 weeks at a specific factory that the faculty and the school organize. And in some cases, 60 to 70 students will go to one factory, stay in dorms, and then watch somebody do some work within the factory. In the English department, I put question marks because they don't know what they're doing. They say that. They actually say, I don't know what most of my students are doing. But it's mandatory at this university to take an internship. For this English department, they feel like it's a complete waste of time and their students' time and everybody's resources. And in some cases, the students are going back to their old high schools and helping their English teachers develop lessons. But almost to a person, they feel like this is not useful for our students and for the education we're trying to give them. I'd like to focus on engineering because this is where I collected most of my data, but it really was fascinating and troubling. One of the students said it was more like visiting a scenic spot. They're, again, spending 2 weeks at a factory. In one case, there was 200 students from 4 universities staying in a dorm, and they were all doing their internship at the same time. And again, one master worker would be assigned 60 to 70 students where they would crowd into a small room and watch this one person operate machinery, and sometimes speak over the din of the machinery about what he or she was doing.
Can I ask, how long were their days? How long would they spend with watching the machinery, watching this?
A full working day, so about 8 to 10 hours. And then they'd go back to their dorm, which they had to pay for. And they had to pay for Wi-Fi too, which was interesting.
I think mostly the students will have like morning section, just listening to some lessons or like theoretical lectures given by the factory workers there. And in the afternoon, they actually visit the machinery in the factory. That's what it is.
And Jaha would know because she's translating a lot of the sound files. And so after this issue of being a tourist came up a few times, I asked some of the faculty about this because I had recently come from a visit to the Huangshan Mountains, and I kind of had a first-hand feeling of what it was like to be a tourist in a scenic spot in China. This is a hiking trail in the Yellow Mountains, where you can see I was with a few hundred of my friends. But I think sometimes people in the U.S. cannot appreciate the sheer number of people that live in China. It's really hard to imagine. But when you go to some of these places, these are beautiful scenic spots. There's tons of people. And it's often large tourist groups going from one spot to the next. So when the students are talking about their internship as visiting that, I think I understand what they're talking about. But in order to not cast a negative light on Chinese mountains, I have to take a detour from this academic talk and just say that I've been studying Chinese and Japanese landscape painting since I was a small child. You can see an example on the far right. And I had to visit these mountains because these are the mountains that are often featured in these paintings. And they're some of the most beautiful geologic formations and mountains that I've ever seen on this planet. So the one in the middle, luckily I woke up at 5 in the morning and shared this spot with one young man who took my picture. But one of the cool things about these mountains is they've named every single rock. So this is above monkey gazing out at a sea of clouds. So I just have to say that the whole time wasn't like in the middle of a traffic jam, although most of it was. So the way that some of the students described their internships was we walk around and look most of the time just like a tourist. This student, my internship at this motor factory, the factory is so dangerous we couldn't operate the machines. But this student really was impressed by the power of the machinery and felt that this actually helped him think more clearly about where he wanted to go in the future. Another student made an observation: the university should train the workers who teach us, since they're not capable of teaching. Another, it's too noisy to hear what the teachers are saying. The school can buy wireless headsets. Every student can learn more efficiently. And I'm happy with my internship because at night in the dorm we can play together and chat more with each other. More than a few students talked about, this is a time away from the intense, I don't want to say grind, but the intensity of studies in a Chinese college. And so they felt like this is one of the few times they were away from that. And they were in these dorms and they could just hang out. And they didn't have to do a lot of work for them. One of the things, though, that I think is extremely important is the student saying, I think if you want to make internships more meaningful, the university should first define internship. Can't emphasize this enough because the faculty and the administrators at this university, again, which is one of the biggest and most prestigious in China, they admit they don't know what internships are, or what they mean, or what they should look like. But they're mandatory for all students. So I also visited some area vocational colleges, and I think that one of the if not solutions, one of the things that universities like Tianjin and UW-Madison need to do is to look at what our colleagues are doing in vocational education. So one of the things that was very striking as I visited this college, but also visit vocational colleges around the US, is some of the classrooms are indistinguishable from the workplace. There's no separation between classroom and lab. They're one and the same. So on the left, this is a replica of a CNC machining factory at this vocational college, where the students are actually operating these machines. And then on the right, which looks like a car dealership where you pull your car in to get it serviced, the classrooms are on the left side with sliding doors, and that's the actual bay where the students, within a 50-minute class period, they're constantly flowing between the classroom and where they're actually working on the vehicles. So this is just another way to think about active learning and experiential education, because in this college, internships are very rare. This is a 3-year program, so it's not 2-year like a US community or technical college. Some students do internships, but the way that the faculty describe it is many of them don't feel like they need to because they're gaining the experience while they're at school. And there's a lot of social connections and contacts being made with companies who come in and do guest lectures in these classrooms/labs. A couple other interesting things is at this particular factory, they talked about hiring older workers from local factories to socialize the students and to not only a strong work ethic, but also how professional machinists talk and how they interact with each other. At least is the way it's described to me. This was an intentional move to show these young people what it's like to be in this profession. The other thing I'll point out is at this particular college and a couple others I visited, there's massive investments in cutting-edge technology. The Chinese government is putting a lot of money into building this, I forget how many $billion 3D printing facility at this vocational institute. And I can't help but contrast that with the technical college I visited in Colorado last week, where they were talking about having 5 to 8-year-old CNC machines that kept on breaking down, and they can't get enough money from the state government, much less the federal government, about upgrading the machinery. They just felt like we're trying to train the students, but it's kind of a catch-up game with the quality of the technology we have. So some of the implications, the so what questions. For all you graduate students in the room, you know that this is an important question to ask of your research, the so what. For Tianjin University, I don't want to sound like it's all negative. There's definitely some positive things happening. Students are required to do reflective writing and write reports about their internship experience and then hand that into their instructor. That's something that does not always happen in the US, where you don't have that feedback in that reflective period. And there's also a strong interest among some faculty in experiential education in the classroom. I met with a few faculty who are following the active learning movement in the US very closely, but they describe themselves as rebels, and they kind of have to meet in secret. But there's still some faculty at these universities that they understand backwards design, scaffolding your lesson, fading out from instruction and all that. They say it's really difficult to do, but they're very interested in active learning. And that's something to build on. What I'm going to tell this university, though, in my report, is they need to not rely on internships as the only venue for active learning, which is, I think, what they're doing. Much of the pedagogy and student experience in their 4 years at college is sitting in a lecture. And so they're looking at the internship as the time where the student can actually experience and apply their theoretical knowledge to the practical world. And as you can see, in some cases, that's not exactly happening. And so one of the things that could and should be done, and to their credit, almost all the faculty I spoke with and administrators said their programs need to be longer and a lot more active. They understand that. And they need a lot more employers, so they're not having 60 to 70 or 200 students going to the same factory. This, again, is a problem with the sheer size of the college student population in China. But a lot of the faculty recognize they need more employers that are willing and capable to take students on. And then the last thing is learning from vocational colleges and still actively asking, are there jobs out there for our college graduates? But I think that this shouldn't happen at the same time that we're redefining the trades at the expense of a comprehensive college education. And again, this is something that is happening. One of the things that was written in that Nature piece is that China does not need more graduates with pieces of paper to proclaim how clever they are. And this is a similar type of disparagement you hear about four-year education in college students as you hear in the US when people talk about pointy-headed academics, the ivory tower. We don't need students in college anymore. We need people to be working in the trades. So it's just a tone and a type of rhetoric which I think is not useful. And finally, some implications for Wisconsin and the US. We should definitely learn from strengths and weaknesses of other national systems. This needs to be done critically, though. I hear too often that we just need to replicate Germany. But even the Germans will say that's impossible to do in the US for a number of reasons. There's a lot we have to learn from strengths and weaknesses of other national systems, though. One of the things in Wisconsin especially is we disinvest in public education. We need to recognize that in order to pull off internships, we need adequate resources at each college. In the last biennial budget, there was enough money put in for the entire UW system for 2 personnel to ramp up internships across the entire UW system. That's completely inadequate. Each college, much less the department, needs somebody that can manage this for students. We need to pay close attention to problems with equity, access, and discrimination. There's ample evidence that students of color, low-income students, first-generation students don't have access to some of these experiences either because they're unpaid and they simply can't take them, or there's some discrimination happening at the point of entry when students are getting callbacks or being offered an internship experience. And we need to address that and at least own up to it. We should also be learning from our colleagues in vocational education, especially in fields that have a track record doing this, such as engineering and nursing. And then finally, we need to carefully screen and hold accountable the employers that are hosting our college interns. This news about labor abuses happening in China by Foxconn-operated facilities needs to be addressed, and it needs to be part of the conversation as Foxconn makes a strong presence in Wisconsin and forges relationships with the University of Wisconsin universities and also the tech colleges. As far as I know, all the news reports I've read and meeting accounts, what's happening in China in the internship program there is not part of the discussion. And it needs to be part of the discussion so that we can make sure that students here are being offered an equitable, safe, and quality internship program. And then, let's let you watch this really quickly.
A factory run by Online Precision Industry Company Limited, also known as Foxconn Technology Group. The Taiwanese company is the world's largest electronics contractor manufacturer, making products such as the iPhone and iPad. It employs more than 1 million workers, mostly in its factories in China. But in recent years, it has been moving toward automation, replacing workers with robots, for good reason. The cost of labor in China is rising, and finding people still willing to work for low pay has become a challenge. But company officials say switching to robots has been a long-term strategy. At this Foxconn factory in Kunshan, China, there's hardly a worker in sight. The work is done by robots. This is how future factories will look.
30年前，自动化这个名词还不是一个很响亮，它就叫做制程改善，一步一步往下走过来。所以，自动化我想是跑不掉的。
This factory makes parts for mobile phones. In the past, there were 1,500 workers working here. Now only one person is needed on each shift. Each day, the factory can produce 1 million parts. Despite using fewer workers, Foxconn believes the quality has improved. Other entrepreneurs are interested.
机器人不会罢工，机器人不用用到这么大的一个电力，所以它在很多方面，不管是在它的重复性、它的精密度、它的可靠性来说，都比人力好。但它取代的来说，它是取代的是一个平常的劳工。所以我们是希望我们的劳力是能够更升级，把人用在智慧上面的劳，而不是用在廉价的劳力。
The Kunshan factory has cut its workforce in half in the past 2 years and increased its earnings. In the future, it's possible robots can replace 100% of the work factory workers do. Experts say, seeing it's just a matter of time. CNA, China.
So I wanted to share this largely because with every conversation I had with an administrator at this university, and then I gave a talk in Beijing with some faculty from Peking University, Renmin, and another college, AI and robotics is on everybody's mind. I don't think it's an overstatement to say people in Chinese higher education are kind of freaking out about what this means, not just for their graduates and their job prospects, but also curriculum and instruction. Are they teaching the right materials, and are they teaching it in the right way? This was something that came out of left field in my visit, but AI, again, was the topic of almost every conversation with an administrator. In terms of internships, though, I think it's clear that automation is going to affect different disciplines and occupations differently. In manufacturing, when I spoke to some employers, they're not offering internships at all because they've already automated. So they only need really highly trained workers that they're recruiting from internationally, or low-skilled workers that don't have a high school education. The whole middle part of the labor force has been automated already in many of these companies. And then one of the things that people spoke about in the context of AI is that they feel that this is going to make internships even more important, that students develop these skills that robots cannot do. And that's something some people say in the United States as well. And I don't want to get into that topic too much about whether automation is going to destroy a bunch of jobs or create new ones. But it's a pretty widespread feeling that students, as they go out into the labor market, the more they can demonstrate they can do non-routine, complicated tasks, the better for them. Pretty soon we'll be releasing data from our U.S. college internship study. This is just an example. This is internship participation by race and ethnicity. This is asking students about how well their internship, the job supervisor and academic program coordinated. So we're really excited to be releasing data like these from our U.S. institutions, and then I'll have some from the Chinese institutions in a couple months. And then next steps, we're expanding again our college internship study. Stay tuned for more data, and please come to our next CCWT talk. It's going to be over in Education Sciences with Matthias Cavalloni. And thank you very much for your time.
So actually when I was in college in China, that was 10 years ago. So we are required to have an internship to graduate. But there was no internship course to give you a structured guidance of how you should do internship, or there's no faculty to help you to choose an internship. So such as review the job description or talk to the supervisor at the site. I just wonder if that's still the case in China right now, about internship courses or any structured information for students.
Yeah, I don't think there was any courses that I heard about. But again, in the engineering departments, it was highly structured where they had built it into, again, something that all sophomores did, for those 2 or 3 weeks, and then all seniors had to do it. And all of the bus trips, the factory visit, everything was organized by the department. So it was highly structured in that way. But in terms of actually, and like Java said, in the mornings, during the factory visit, the students would have these lecture periods. But as far as I can tell, and you listen to the transcript, you can chime in, there wasn't like an internship course about what to expect, what to do, what you should gain from this, things like that.
Yeah, because I'm interviewing some of the U.S. Educators, and for those who require students to do an internship, they really give the students a course that they'll have a space and time to come to communicate. I just wonder if that's the case in China.
So I have one question. I'd like to know the reason why you choose Tianjin University as an observation site. Is it because is the internship program is very good, or it's very representative in China? I mean, it's very typical in China. So I'd like to know the reason why you choose Tianjin University.
Thank you for the question. And I need to build that into my writing and speaking about this.
Okay.
Because they invited me. So it was not a selection based on certain criteria such as, is it representative of research universities or not. So I do hope to visit other universities in China, but also some other vocational colleges because I think that point of comparison is really interesting.
And the reason why you choose the majors like this architecture and engineering and English as the example for your observation.
Right, well first maybe I can speak about the sampling process, and this is something that all qualitative field researchers have to be thinking about, is when you're doing something like snowball sampling, why are people telling you to go to certain departments? So the engineering programs here were held up as like kind of the paragon of internships within this university. So I was strongly directed into that department. But I also went out of my way to speak to people in English and Marxist studies and some other departments. So I wanted to understand kind of the spread. But architecture and engineering, that's where I collected most of my data. Because again, that's where people were directing me to. And at a certain point where you're in another country and another institution, you follow the lead of your host. And there's a strength and a weakness to that.
But I'd like to explain why I asked you the question, because I'm a teacher educator in China. And I know the education major to cultivate the teacher in the middle school or the elementary school. I think the internship program maybe is the best for the teacher education major. And because they provide some courses, like internship courses for the teacher candidates in China. So maybe next time when you come back to China to do some observation, you can choose the education major. Yeah, and they can be a kind of the representative for the internship program in China. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And for those of you that are involved in this study directly, I'm curious to hear what you think, because in this study we've deliberately excluded disciplines or programs that have a really strong track record in clinical placements, such as teacher education and nursing. Social work is also another example where there's a long history of, they don't necessarily call them internships, but field placements. And so I think at some point, we may want to start looking at these programs either as models for how internships in other disciplines could be. But that's something that was a deliberate sampling choice. But yeah, we recognize that in doing so, we're ignoring some of the strong cases.
And talking about this, I know we call, in China we call internship, and in the States we call practicum. So especially education programs and also nursery school, they have a lot of practical practice. Just add to this point.
Right. And do you remember doing translations? I was told there's 3 words in Mandarin for internships. Yeah. And so, sushi. That was the one that was most likened to these cases. So, and then the practicum and the clinicals were a different word. But wrestling with this problem, I think, is something that is really important. So thank you for bringing that up.
Just now, Chen Zi talked about something about the internship courses in China. I know because I worked at a vocation technology school before I come here. So I know in my college, in my worked college, they have a lot of different kinds of the internship courses. I think in the comprehensive university, I think it depends on different subjects. Different subjects they have the internship course or not. But in the most vocational technical school, they have the internship courses. Yes.
It's like student take credits.
What?
Social take credits.
Yes, They must, if they, the first semester they will study at the school, then the second semester they must go to the factory. Because my college, I work with the college, they are the auto car. They learn how to make the auto car, so the students must go to the factory to internship. Yes, and we have the internship course to tell the students how to do in the factory. Yes.
And one of the interesting things I thought about Tianjin University was many of their students are going to graduate school. And so the students and faculty were actively questioning, do we need these internships for students going on to graduate school? Because a lot of them, it was interesting, they didn't view themselves as going out into the workforce at all. You know, maybe they're going to be a professor and that's going to be their job, in which case
They are not interested in internship.
No.
Because they are doing, right.
they felt like it was a waste of time.
Yeah, and I think I can answer this question because there are different missions for the different levels of the higher education. For the comprehensive university, just like the Tianjin University, their mission is to prepare very elite or very professional professors in the future. So they focus on the theoretical courses. So that's why many of the faculties and the students, they are very interested in the graduate school. But for the vocational college, just like you said that, their mission is to prepare for the worker forces in the future. So they focus on the internship. So that's why some comprehensive universities, they have no clear definition of the internship, or they have no very clear training program for the internship. But for the vocational college, so they have, I think. Yes. It is a kind of the national educational system in China.
Right.
Just now you mentioned the English subject. They don't know where to intern. So I think this subject don't need to do the internship. So because in China, we don't have some places to not practice we don't have the sorry, my English limited. 那个嘉禾，你可以帮我翻译一下吗？Sorry， 就是在中国，比如说英语，我们没有地方去实习，因为这个英语这个专业所限。但是很多那个技术职业技术学校，他们必须要实习的，因为像刚才这个老师说的一样，就是他因为他是要求他要从事这个职业，比如说3年毕业之后他要从事这个职业，所以要求他必须实习。但是英语可能我们不见得就是一定要去实习，所以分不同的学科。Sorry.
For example, English major students, after they graduate, they're not expected to work in a certain field or a certain job. So they're not required to go for internship. But for some vocational schools, certain majors they will go to a certain field.
Right.
So they will.
Yeah, and these are really interesting issues for the U.S. as well, I think, because there was a proposal to make all graduates of the UW system take an internship, regardless of discipline, regardless of institutional mission. So I think there's some really important questions to ask. Should that be mandated for all students across an entire university system? I think the answer is no, but that question needs to be asked. One of the interesting things, though, about the comprehensive aspect at Tianjin University, which is similar to UW-Madison, is one of the things that's happening in graduate education in the U.S. is faculty are slowly recognizing that not all of their students are going to be professors because there's only so many positions. And so there's a growing movement in graduate education in the United States, and I did hear this from one professor in Tianjin, that they need to do a better job of teaching their students who are going to graduate school about the job opportunities out there outside of academia, whether it's in government or nonprofits or wherever. Because right now, career education or discussions about careers is often missing from graduate education. I think we have time for one more question.
Yes, Dr. Hora, so can you just define the word internship and maybe whereas here called practical training? Yeah, and what is the purpose to have internship or the practical training for the students?
Ooh, that's a great question. So for my colleagues, can you recall the definition that we offer in the survey? Because it has to do with time, right? And the intention of it. I'm looking for help here. Matt?
I'm sort of, from memory, a position in an established company or organization, some schedule of time. Is there working at entry-level positions in that organization and coordinated with a degree or program? It's pretty close to, so.
Right, and we settled on a definition mostly for our survey so that people taking the survey knew what we were thinking about with respect to an internship. I don't think that necessarily means that that's how I define it though. In terms of purpose, again, I'm viewing this from the problem of a learning scientist or instructional designer where they can ideally be venues where a student becomes not only socialized or enculturated into a profession, but also it's a place where they can apply theoretical or academic knowledge to authentic real-world problems. Ideally, that's what would happen. That's why people that are doing internships, where they're just serving coffee or making photocopies, which are more common than we would like, should not be called internships. And that's one of the fears if we make internships mandated across an entire university. That's what some students will be doing. Unpaid, irrelevant work, and we shouldn't be having our students do that. All right, thank you all for coming, and again, our next talk will be November 20th.